So I lived in Australia for 2 years and cannot wait to go back. It's definitely my favourite place I've ever lived. However, there are some lies and some negative things about Australia that aren't always brought up online, and I'm going to tell you about them today. Now, on social media, moving to Australia is glorified quite a lot, I would say. Yes, Australia is a beautiful country, and yes, there is so many positives about moving there from the UK in particular. However, what you see on social media about Australia is only a very small part of what life is actually like there. There's a lot of things which don't really get shown or spoken about, a lot of things that you might not expect when moving there. A lot of people expect that it's just going to be a massive holiday, but we'll come on to all that in this video. This isn't to put you off going, by the way. This is just to share the reality so you guys can expect both sides. Yes, there's the amazing side. Yes, there's some misconceptions. Some of these misconceptions are positives though. So the first misconception about Australia, in my opinion, is the work-life balance. Now, the amount of times that I've heard people say, oh, Australia has a much better work-life balance than the UK. The work-life balance in Australia is better than everywhere. I feel like the term work-life balance leads people to believe that in Australia, you don't have to work hard. You're going to be working a lot less. You're going to have so much more free time to do stuff. The reality is, when you move to Australia and get set up, if you want to save money, you're going to have to work just as hard as you did in the UK. You're going to have to work the same amount of hours. So I actually find that the work-life balance isn't any different. You still got the same amount of time off and you still got the same amount of time working. That's the reality. I guess the term work-life balance, when it comes to actually what you're doing on your days off, does make sense, because there's no doubt that your days off and your time out of work is going to be so much better in Australia compared to what it is in the UK. But the actual balance between your work and your life, I found, is not that much different. You still have to work very hard. You still have to put the hours in if you want to save money. I found that I wasn't working any less than I was in the UK. I didn't have any more free time than I did in the UK. The biggest difference being, obviously, that free time that you do have is a lot better. I don't really agree with the term that work-life balance is a lot better in Australia, because you still have to work just as hard, and you need to not get it twisted that, yeah, you're going to be working way less. You can if you want, but if you want to actually save some good money and grind, then you've got to work just as much. The second misconception is that there's so many bugs, snakes, spiders, everything like that in Australia. This, for the most part, is a lie, I found. Don't get me wrong, if you go to northern Queensland, if you go to the jungle, if you go completely rural, the farms, stuff like that, you're gonna see snakes and you're gonna see bugs. That's obvious. However, it's made out in Australia that you're gonna be finding huntsman spiders in your shoes, snakes behind the toilet, spiders in the toilet, all that kind of stuff. When I first got to Australia, I was so paranoid and I was checking the toilet every time I went. But after a week or two, you just get bored and you forget to check. And then a year passes and you realise you haven't even seen one like big spider. I spent 2 years in Australia, and I can honestly say the only snakes I saw was when I was doing farm work, which, no shit, I'm on a farm. And I can confidently say that I saw more spiders in the UK than I did in Australia. I'm pretty sure I only saw one big spider, and that was outside in Queensland. I saw a couple of redbacks, but that was it. I saw way more spiders in the UK. I hear people say they wouldn't go to Australia just because there's too many bugs, there's too many snakes and spiders. Honestly, get that out of your head. If that's putting you off going to Australia, then you are missing out so much, because it's a big myth. I went to Southeast Asia and there's so many more bugs there. There is a couple of things you need to watch out for in Australia though, and that is the flies and the cockroaches. They're not a joke. There's a lot of flies, particularly in the outback and up north, and also a lot of cockroaches, which, yeah, are horrible. But snakes, spiders, it's a big myth from my experience. Number 3 goes back to what I was saying at the start, and that is that it's a constant holiday. This is for mostly people on a working holiday visa who choose to move to Australia, and like I said, social media leads you to believe like it's a constant holiday. For me, I wanted to move to Australia from when I was pretty young. It was always something that I wanted to do, and I kind of knew what to expect because it was something that I honestly wanted to do. I wanted to go and live there. I knew that I had to work. I knew that I had to do the normal shit that you have to do in day-to-day life. But I think for people who only want to move to Australia because they've seen it on TikTok and other people's experience and them chilling on the beach, if you're going just because you've seen it on social media, you are in for a bit of a reality shock, because yeah, the first few weeks are amazing. When you're traveling there, it's amazing, but the novelty does wear off of living there after a while. And when you're not traveling and you're working, life is fairly similar. Yes, your days off are a lot better, but you still have to go to work, you have to get up early, you have to pay rent, you have to do your food shop, do your washing, all that kind of stuff. But like I said, the difference is you're going to be doing all that in a way nicer country. But it's not like it always seems on social media. You will definitely have some difficult moments when you live abroad, there's no doubt. I always say that your low points when you move abroad might actually be lower than when you're at home, but your high points of being abroad are going to be so much higher than anything you would have experienced at home. Number 4 is that it's always hot. Now, moving to Australia, again, you expect it to be so hot all the time. However, I was very shocked by the Australian winter. I had winter in Sydney, I had a little bit of winter in Adelaide, and I had winter in Perth. Particularly winter in Sydney, I remember it being so cold. Honestly, so cold. I remember I went with my mate originally to Australia. He bought this massive coat with him and I was like, what are you doing? Why are you bringing a coat? We're going to Australia. It got to winter. I was like, do you know what? Fair play for bringing a coat. I was so cold. Obviously, if you go up north to Queensland and the Northern Territory and stuff like that, generally it is hot all year round. But your major cities in Australia, Perth, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, generally the winters, apart from Brisbane, the winters in all them cities do get pretty cold and you're gonna need a coat. And point number 5 is not all of Australia is amazing. On social media, obviously you see the highlights. I was lucky enough to move around, travel and live in so many different places during my time in Australia. But what it did mean was that I got to see both sides to Australia. I saw some of the best beaches in the world. I saw some of the best things. I went to Ayers Rock, I did the Barrier Reef, I saw so many incredible things. However, we had times where we had to live in pretty shit areas. We travelled to places that were pretty rough, like Alice Springs. Particularly living in Adelaide, we actually got kicked out of our share house, which is a story for another day. But we ended up having to move to the northern suburbs where it was so rough. Finding work and stuff there as well, like it didn't feel like Australia. And sometimes you will find yourself in them situations where you're somewhere in Australia which you don't see online. I remember being there thinking like, fuck, we're in Australia, why are we not on a beach? We're literally in these shit suburbs, but it was kind of unavoidable at that point. But yeah, not all of Australia is beautiful beaches. When you get to the outskirts of a lot of the cities, it can get a bit rough. Not rough, but not what you see online. So there's definitely two sides to Australia. I definitely saw both. You might be able to avoid it and only stay in the nice places, but sometimes you don't always have a choice. So there's 5 lies or misconceptions or whatever about Australia. For me, there's not that many negatives about living there. There were some points though that a lot of people expect, I think, online what they hear, but that's what I found from my personal experience. Some things which, yeah, don't really get brought up online that I definitely found out when I was living there. So overall, I think Australia is a great move for anyone, particularly for young people in their 20s. I loved Australia. There's obviously going to be downsides like there is anywhere, but there's not too many. So if you need any more help with moving abroad, moving from the UK to Australia, working holiday visa advice, anything like that, then check out my other videos, give the video a like and some comments, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video.